So this panel is definitely near and dear to my heart. A lot of us, as the pandemic hit, turned to virtual production to kind of keep the entire business going, to keep the world communicating. And this is definitely a rock star panel of people who have lived it and now into the transition as we go forward. Hey folks, if you're socializing, let's take it in the hallway. Not that we don't love you, but. All right, our moderator today is Claudia Souza, who has been heading our cloud efforts for the last 3+ years, and a true group of people who are using it every day. If you ever wonder, do people really use this? Is this just the thing that the technology people keep talking about? This would be the group. So with that, Claudia, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dave, and welcome everybody to our panel, which is Media Creation in the Cloud. What is the status? Where are we at in 2025? I do want everybody to introduce themselves, but instead of going through the traditional person-by-person introduction, I'm going to work that into our questions. But before I even get to that kind of question, I want to actually ask everybody here on the panel to give me your perspective on the word cloud. What does cloud actually mean to you? Because there are so many different ways and conceptions of when you say cloud, what people think. So just a quick down the line, and what do you think of when you think of cloud, and what does it mean to chess.com?
For us, probably one of the biggest benefits that we see with cloud, and sort of what I associate with cloud production, is a very decentralized workflow. Everybody working across various continents throughout the world and being able to contribute to a single show, all happening in real time with minimal latency.
Perfect. Elena?
Okay, I've heard a lot of times, and it depends on who you're talking to. So as a magic hard drive somewhere in the cloud. So if you're talking to legal or InfoSec, you don't want to say cloud, because that would push you through the whole boat of rigmarole of validations and things. But ultimately, if you refer to it as data center, are they your own or public, then it's being treated with respect and understanding of the technology that it takes.
Yeah, definitely have a view on this, since we did a big 2030 vision around actually moving production to the cloud. And so we have to define what that means. And for us, it's a combination of public cloud, private cloud, hybrid, on-prem infrastructure. The thing that's really distinguishing, I think, is that it's distributed, so it's remotely accessible from many different locations, so you're not restricted to being on site. And the other one is scalability. So are you able to scale up VMs, storage, and other things as needed, deploy containers wherever your assets are, so you don't need to move your assets around. So that's the distinguishing characteristics, I think, for us.
Yeah, I think these have all been really good answers so far. I'm sort of along the same lines as all of you, that I think that when it comes to cloud, I really see it as the mechanism that has taken location and proximity out of the process. We no longer even need to worry about that, because the cloud enables us to work together wherever we are. It's also that the idea that creativity doesn't happen in a single space, and so you want your technology, your creative tools to be accessible no matter where you are, with everything that you need, because once that idea is gone, it may just be a spark, and if you don't nurture it in that moment, it may be gone. So it's all about accelerating the creative process, bringing people together, and not worrying about sort of location proximity and how that used to come into play.
For us, it was pretty much the same thing as Jim mentioned and David mentioned. It was scalability, and in our case, being able to scale much larger than the current facility that we actually have physically, because we tend to do a lot of shows in person, and we have these breakout rooms, and that number keeps growing and growing and growing, and therefore we can't just keep adding hardware and adding hardware and adding hardware every time they want to keep adding breakout rooms. So there was this whole push of like, well, can we explore some sort of a cloud workflow where maybe we can move it off premise and put it in the cloud and scale it as we need it, and then deflate it basically as soon as we're done with that show. And at the same time, for the shows themselves, where you might say, well, why don't you just put the hardware at the show, and then that saves you the effort and you rent it for the show. And again, in that situation, what we were looking for is to take bodies off the floor, because ultimately, as somebody putting on a show, and I'm sure many of you experience this, you have a finite amount of space. And by being able to move that workflow to the cloud and then telling the operator, hey, you know what, you don't even need to be there. We can hire people from across the country to operate these various smaller breakout rooms, and they don't have to be at the location, so we don't have to fly people out, we don't have to put them up. We can just say, hey, here's your login code, go. And they can just be in charge of that one room, and that's one less body at the show site that we need to deal with later.
So Alex, you actually took us exactly into the next thing that I wanted to discuss. When we're looking at media creation in the cloud status, where are we now? Depending on what you do, how you're using it, we're at all kinds of different stages in it. So we really have a great panel of a wide variety of where are they within their cloud journey. And so I wanted to ask a few of you to, or all of you if you want to, similar to what Alex did, talk about where you are now. For instance, I know where you are now. Why don't you talk about your take and what you're doing in the cloud right now and have been doing at scale for a couple years?
Yeah, so at chess.com, we're doing roughly 300 live broadcasts a year, all completely in the cloud. We have no on-prem facility, so everything we're doing is decentralized. So we have operators across North America, Europe, South America, and Asia, all operating codependently across a number of shows, sometimes multiple shows at the same time. So we're doing all these huge broadcasts at scale with 20, 30, 40, sometimes 90 cameras that we're backhauling into our cloud, developing from there, and then producing, huge, what many would consider giant television for chess, which is very cool.
Thank you so much. And Elena, you can bring a different viewpoint as to how you're trying to leverage cloud and why, and how you're looking at using it as an addition or a replacement. What's your take on it?
Well, Cisco being a global company, so we're spread across the globe with multiple points of presence, and the only way to kind of unify the teams and give them access to the same tool set and content is really, this is where cloud shines as a perfect solution. However, transition to the cloud is pretty challenging because part of the problem is fears. It's a change, it's a new technology. It's also the risk of losing control and control of your data, especially for a company, with a high-tech company like Cisco, whose product is actually backbone of the internet, is built on, and all aspects of our life. It becomes a very attractive target for the hackers, so cybersecurity becomes an issue. And that's one of the biggest concerns for the company, provided the content that we're dealing with is pretty much the threats, the security. Yeah, so it's been a process because it's just like over a course of a year, we've been validating different platforms that are cloud-based that would enrich our productions and kind of provide this efficiency, bring the team together, and also give the tools that we actually don't have in-house. And like everybody was talking in previous panels about AI, and almost unless you have AI specialists on your team, it's almost like a mission impossible to create the models with the tool set that you need and kind of provide your productions the wow factor that technology provides these days. And it seems like it's the logical solution is going to cloud and just try to conquer those fears with the managed risks, with the slow introduction to cloud, the hybrid environment, and multiple safeguards.
That flows into a very good part of this discussion, which is fear. There are so many ways in which people fear that move to the cloud, whether it's the fear of the unknown. We've been doing this way forever, and it works. Why do we want to change? Whether it's fear about security threats, fears related to costs and risks and mitigating those risks, which is why, Jim, I'd like you to speak to your role and what MovieLabs has been doing to assist people in facing those fears and having a roadmap.
Yeah, so MovieLabs is a technology joint venture of the traditional Hollywood studios, so Disney, Sony, Universal, Paramount, and Warner. And obviously they're all very concerned about leaks and release of content before the movie opens in the theater or on a streaming service. And I think we've seen in other industries, you can make the cloud secure. Part of the problem is actually getting people convinced that it's secure and having the right processes in place to ensure that that security is put in by design when the workflow is created, and then that there's continuous monitoring going on to ensure that configurations aren't changed that might open up access points. So one of the important things there is having a move to zero trust infrastructure, where you basically are making sure that every access is authenticated, checked for authorizations, logged, and we're seeing the tools and such getting to the point where we have more things that can support that model, but there's still a lot of work to be done on that. And one of the things that's very important in that is security assessments. And so the MPA has this Trusted Partner Network program that does a lot of security assessments, and they have been moving to an app and cloud model so they can do assessments of cloud-based infrastructure. And with the latest release of their best practices and controls, which they just did, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, they've added some zero trust controls to that so that those services that have moved to a zero trust model can actually make sure that they are checking all of the boxes there. And some of it is also change management. I mean, you have to get people used to working, in different ways from which they worked before. And you want to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of the artist's work, creative work, because you are going to have to log in. And ideally, you only have to log in once. You don't have to log in a dozen times to every different service with different credentials. So we still have a lot of work to do, but no doubt you can make the cloud secure, and some of the most, I think, security and content leak sensitive studios, have moved a lot of their stuff to the cloud.
Thank you. David, I am sure that you have helped many customers address those fears as they are implementing your solution. Do you want to talk a little bit either about how you've helped them address it, or some of the stories of what you've encountered as far as barriers?
Yeah, sure. I come from a background of, I was a television editor for 20 years. Most of that time was at Viacom, now Paramount. And during that time there, not only was I editing, but I was developing and working on workflow solutions for creatives, trying to streamline the creative process. Because, I used to say that an edit is never finished early. You just get as much done before the deadline as you can. And you hope that it's in good enough shape to get it out. And most of the time it is. But if given an extra hour or an extra day, I think people, if you said to your creatives, I'm going to give you 2 more days on this project, what would they say? What would they do? How would they spend that time? And so I've always viewed the cloud as, again, a mechanism for enabling that flexibility, that freedom, that way to reallocate time from the day that used to be wasted doing different things and put that towards the creative process. Now, while I was at Viacom, I became a LucidLink customer, and I just sort of saw that this is the way that the industry is going, and these technologies are finally out there. But I think going back a little bit to your question before of sort of what's the fear basis for a lot of these decisions is I think that the cloud really suffers from a terrible first impression. We were sold a bill of goods 10, 15 years ago about, hey, the cloud is coming, put everything in the cloud. And what was it? It was cloud storage that took a long time to upload, a long time to download, and the tool wasn't ready yet for actually implementing the way that we need to. And it doesn't matter that the technology has come so much farther. There's that still mindset of you know, that bad taste in your mouth of, well, do I really want to rely on the cloud when it was so clunky the first time that I used it, or the second time I used it? And so when I work with customers, you know, we're really trying to not only show that this is giving the flexibility to the users to work the way that they're most comfortable working, and they don't need to change their creative process. The tool supports them, and that's sort of the common theme today, whether it's the AI, virtual production, it's using these new tools in the most efficient way to promote creativity and promote the creative work, as opposed to letting this do the work for you. And so, you know, when I looked at LucidLink and I said, we can just simply change the location that we're storing our media, and that will have immediate and exponential gains and value and benefit to the way that we work. That's where I really saw this path. So when I work with customers, we're not only looking at how can we improve work with collaboration across remote teams, and for anyone who doesn't know, LucidLink, we allow you to use cloud storage as though it were a local drive. So it just comes up on your computer, just like a USB drive that you had plugged in, and you don't need to download the media in order to use it. So it's immediate access to all of your footage. You know, it could be terabytes upon terabytes or petabytes, and you can just grab anything. And so realizing that this not only opened up the way that I worked and sort of laid out my day and time management, but I was able to collaborate with people across the world. We had a global talent pool all of a sudden, and we were actually able to start putting together workflows that were never before possible. So I always like to talk about this. The TV series Atlanta shot their 3rd season in Europe, and they used LucidLink for their cloud storage. So they shot during the day. In the evening, they would upload their dailies. They'd process their dailies and upload from a local dailies house in Europe. And because of the difference in time zone, when their assistant editors walked into the post facility in LA, all the footage was already there waiting for them to just start their day and get to work. So you've just condensed all that wasted time, and people can get to work immediately.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit to Mike and have him talk to this, because he is doing it at scale and has been for a couple years, and is doing it completely in the cloud instead of a hybrid model. So what have you had to face in regards to fears and security and concerns, and how did you mitigate it?
Yeah, so my background is in esports and live sports production, and so that's sort of the lens that I'm coming at this with. To talk a little bit about fears, when we first started to pitch this idea of a cloud broadcasting solution, really one of the goals that we had around it was to make every operator that sat down for our cloud feel like they were sitting down at a truck that they were comfortable with, right? Everything from an operator level had to be about comfort. If you're a producer, if you're on a line somewhere, if you're an audio engineer, a video engineer, when you sit down, you should have all of the tools that you would expect to have in a studio, on a truck somewhere, anything. And I can pretty confidently say that we've been able to achieve that. So from a trust level at the operator scale, that's allowed some really, really amazing moments. And there's some like intangible things that you don't realize you're gaining when you first move to something that is so immediately accessible, especially from our engineering side of things and our creative side of things, when suddenly you're home and you have a shower thought and you can just go turn your computer on and log into your workstation and go make a change or develop something very quickly that you would have had to write that down, wait to go to drive to work, get into work, start working on that and things like that. So there was some really cool moments that we had when we were, especially when we were first deploying, of all of a sudden somebody would be on and sending messages at 9 p.m. at night because they had an idea. So there's trust at that level with your operators and who's working within your cloud. But then on the security side, I think it's already been discussed a bunch. Like, clouds can be secure. I think it's been proven. It is a non-negotiable item that clouds can be secure. It just takes diligence and effort. In the same way that it takes to secure a facility or secure anything, somebody has to just work towards it, or a team has to work towards it. And there's so many monitoring tools now. I think we mentioned a sort of poor launch to cloud services. I think when the pandemic hit, there was also a really poor launch of a lot of broadcasting services. I'm sure a lot of people in this room suddenly were like, we have to go in the cloud next week. And I won't name names, but I was in a demo once where about 10 minutes into the demo, the entire system crashed. And so yeah, we're like this, nobody had a good experience in the beginning, but now at scale, you know, we're doing 300 plus shows a year. We're secure, we've had no security issues, we've had no breaches. We're able to scale, and we're able to, I think the other thing to trust as well is because it's so agile, you can test whatever you want as quickly as you want. So you can find out very, very rapidly what tools work for you, what tools don't, and you don't have to install into a system, take a facility down, go build out this whole infrastructure. You can simply, you know, add a few EC2s or go spin up another VPC somewhere with a few different machines, and all of a sudden you're off and testing and seeing if this item is secure, does work for you, can it scale to what you need? So yeah, there's a lot of ways to tackle that trust question.
That's great, thank you. You know, one of the things that I want to ask Alex and Elena about is there are many different ways and models that you can utilize cloud. Everyone knows you can use everything in public cloud, private cloud, you can do on-prem or hybrid. Your model is fully cloud. But with Alex and Elena, I think both of you have a very large physical footprint and facilities and everything that is established and working, but yet both of you still see a need for cloud. I'm curious from your point of view, when you are adding cloud to an already existing workflow, beyond your security teams, what else are you running into, or what other things do you have to consider?
That's actually a great question, because we, or at least with the testing I've been doing, a lot of the pushback I get is, you know, there's that fear of the unknown, like we talked about. It's not, the tools are there. I mean, you know, they've been there for a while now, and, you know, there's more and more tools coming. And there was, in the beginning, there were tools that were, hey, look, it's a, you know, it's a hardware-based tool that we kind of threw up in the cloud, and it sort of kind of works, but maybe not always. And then eventually, there were, you know, cloud-first tools that got built, and now those are solid because that's their intention, was to run in the cloud. So what we kind of ran into was this fear of sort of the unknown and sort of the having to give up control. You know, if you have the tool on-prem, and we, like Claudia mentioned, we have a large on-prem, you know, machine room and equipment and multiple studios and such, and being able to run into the machine room and pull a cable or turn it off, or you know, if you panic, do something physical to the machine is great. And then having to take that away from somebody that for so many years has just been used to that, and saying, well, there is no power cord you can pull now. If there's a problem, we need to just have something in place to kind of mitigate that problem ahead of time. And so you start getting into this discussion about, well, maybe you do fully cloud, or maybe you do a hybrid of cloud and on-prem, so you still have the advantages of the scalability of the cloud, but it comes down to your on-prem facility, so you have somewhere to run if something all of a sudden goes sideways. And that's kind of how we're, or at least what I'm trying to do with the folks that I work with that just are a little leery about, well, we're going to throw 16 breakout rooms up into the cloud and hope nothing goes wrong. And to them, that's a very scary thought, even though the software's there, the cloud infrastructure, of course, is there. I mean, we're Microsoft, we own it, the one we're running on. So that's not an issue. It's just getting people past that initial fear factor of giving that up.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, the risk is great, whether it's that the content that you are dealing with is confidential, or whether it's that it's somebody pretty high up on your org, where if something as minor as, you know, a problem with a mic or a problem with something else goes on and it's in the cloud and you can't fix it as quickly, there's going to be a lot of, you know, consequences that come down to you. So I do understand the team's concern in wanting to get that comfort level. So possibly that dipping your toes in the water and getting comfortable with it bit by bit is a good approach to get through that fear. Elena, have you been facing some of that as well?
Oh yes, actually, almost like daily conversations that we have. Yeah, and part of it is just to your point, fear, because it's just something. It's a change. It's not familiar thing, and our teams are dealing. They're just like warriors in the trenches. They need to react in a split second. And if you introduce new technologies, so the only way to tackle it is do the phased approach, and also kind of get your toes into the area and get people familiar, kind of get a sense of comfort and security, and then start introducing all the rich tool sets. And this is like inspire the creativity and kind of creates this wow factor and just get people inspired. So that's when the risk is worth the reward that you're getting out of a cloud. And also creating, because of the phased approach, let's try that in kind of like minimal, one element will go into the cloud, but also back it up with on-prem. And when we did the validation or evaluation of a few contenders for our new automation system, that we actually, one of the criteria was, can we launch in the on-prem and like with a certain like only control plane in the cloud, or the low-risk proxies in the cloud, so the people can see and reach immediately no matter where the content is getting ingested. But if we need to like have the classification of the content, do not put like highly confidential or restricted content in the cloud, but only do the like rights management, and also being able to dynamically pull in and out the content and fail over. It's just like with the scenario that Alex is describing, we've all been in those situations when we need a kill switch. So in that case, if you have, and I think we all trained broadcast professionals, right? So we would never go on the air with a single system with a single point of failure. So provided these multiple layers of backups that you can do emergency failover in a kill switch, that probably will get people comfort getting it, so you can start getting in the cloud, but we're looking after you, we're protecting you. If anything goes wrong, we flip you back over into familiar territory.
You know, it's a really good point, but it brings up another part of the complexity of moving to the cloud that is beyond the technology that's already there. One of the questions I get asked most, and the biggest frustration factor for customers when they're trying to decide how to make the move, do we go bit by bit, do we go all in, is understanding and dealing with the differences in the commercial model. And just even within a company, the budget, how do you budget? How does purchasing deal with doing this? Adding complexity to that is if you're not just doing a straight out comparison of all on-prem, all in cloud, but you're dipping your toes in, therefore you need to keep your on-prem and all those costs, but oh, here, let's add the cloud. And yes, you're adding benefit, but you're usually adding quite a bit of cost in the beginning. Usually there's a lot of cost saving as you scale out. So what have you guys experienced as far as some of the challenges around that change in the business model and commercial model that has to go along with the technology change? Who wants to?
I'll start it out. Yeah, I think that there's a whole shift that has to happen in your way of thinking about the cloud, both as a technology and how it fits budgets and really becomes part of your operations. It's not just comparing two on-prem storage systems or you know, comparing similar hardware. It's the hardware costs, it's the real estate, the infrastructure, the power, the HVAC that you have on your server rooms, all that stuff needs to come into play when you're saying, what's the total cost of ownership of having this on-prem versus paying for, you know, something in the cloud. And when it comes to that, you know, there are other things to keep in mind. There's egress. As you put data up in the cloud, you're often paying for it to come out, and that's really hard to budget for. You know, we've spent a lot of time working with customers, figuring out how to give them an egress-free model so that it makes it predictable, so that you can actually budget and say, hey, if I stick to 100 terabytes, this is what I'm going to be spending. Because it's not sustainable if you just get a bill at the end of the month and they say, hey, guess what? You just went over on all this stuff and you owe more than you owe for the storage. So there's all that, but then there's, you know, this was talked about during one of the previous sessions too, that you need to think about all the cost savings that are coming into play. So it's not just what things cost, but what are you also saving? And whether it's displacing other technologies that you don't need anymore, or being able to make better economical use of your talent pool, time zones, et cetera, we often find times that there are overall savings to the budget. You know, budgets are significantly less than when they were just on-prem.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I know, Jim, you wanted to get a quick thing in, if that's okay, guys? Is it okay for him to get that in?
Just very quickly, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to, again, the definition of cloud. We're talking public cloud, private cloud, infrastructure, on-prem. As long as it is globally accessible and scalable, it's cloud. And those are, you know, business decisions. Like Marvel, for example, deployed an editorial library in the cloud. They actually did it in a private data center cloud, their choice. But it had all the advantages of cloud because they could now remotely access a self-service model for this kind of archive of editorial content, which previously had to go through, you know, an archivist and controlled access. And so, you know, the efficiencies of cloud can be realized regardless of which version of it you're talking about.
Thank you so much. And by the way, I know that we could go on for hours on this subject. All of us are going to be at the show during the breaks when other panels are not going on. Come talk to us, and we'd be happy to continue exploring this subject further. Thanks, guys. Thank you.